there's a lot of misinformation about Islam and Muslims, the practices in the faith. This misinformation is not only on behalf of the non-Muslims and the wider community, but even Muslims themselves sometimes have not the full knowledge of their own religion. So sometimes these misconceptions, they get amplified through this lack of knowledge. So with this short introduction, I hope to highlight some of the basic, most fundamental aspects of the religion, and also address some of these misconceptions, along with giving some time at the end for a Q&A. And that part is the part that I enjoy the most, because it's what I tend to notice is that the questions that you get from the wider community are always very much enlightening. People, they ask questions that sometimes I didn't even think of myself. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, Islam in a nutshell. Islam is one of the three Abrahamic religions. It shares its history with Judaism and Christianity. Sometimes people are shocked at the extent that the history between the three faiths are connected. When a Christian or a person of the Jewish faith opens up the Quran, the Muslim holy book, they find the same stories being mentioned. It comes as a shock to some, the stories of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, amongst all the other prophets. And from a Muslim perspective, we actually see Islam as a continuation of the message from God, from Allah, to mankind as a whole. So we see this message throughout time with Moses, with Jesus, Noah, Abraham, peace be upon them all. So Islam is a religion, but also a way of life. It focuses on both the spiritual aspect of becoming a better human being, encouraging that self-growth. At the same time, it values and puts emphasis on the collective as well, the community, and the sense of community. So throughout the presentation, we'll find out that Islam not only is something that is practiced secluded from society, but it is actually, it has a lot of things to offer society. At least that is my opinion. Again, I might be a little bit biased here, being an imam. But let us get started. So, we will discuss the hadith or narration about Angel Gabriel, which is an essential part in the religion. And we will move on and try to define different dimensions within the religion, the belief aspect, the spiritual refinement aspect, along with some key points that Muslims believe in. So, in Islam, there is a narration passed on through generations of an encounter that the Prophet, peace be upon him, Prophet Muhammad, had with Angel Gabriel. And the story goes that the Prophet was sitting with his companions, with his friends one day, and this man appeared from nowhere, and this man was not recognized by anyone who was present, which at that time, we're speaking about 1,400 years ago, was very odd, because society back then, people they tend to know each other, and it was a well-knit community. And what added to that strangeness was that if he had been a traveler, then you would have seen it in his appearance. Traveling across the desert, it leaves physical trace on a person's body and clothes, and the fatigue that goes along with it. But this man, when he showed up, he showed no such signs, and no one recognized him. And he sat down in a very respectful way next to the Prophet, and he started asking the Prophet a few questions. 4 questions in particular. And these 4 questions would later on become the dimensions of the faith itself. The first thing that the Prophet was asked about was, what is Islam? What response would you give if someone, a stranger, comes and asks you, what is Islam? And the Prophet broke it down in a very simple way. First, linguistically in the Arabic language, Islam means to surrender or to submit. And the idea here is to submit to the will of God. In Arabic, we refer to God by the name that we know him, Allah. And it's important to emphasize that from a Muslim perspective, Allah is the same God of Abraham, is the same God of Noah, the same God that is mentioned in the Old Testament. It is not an idol or things like that. And interestingly, in Muslim traditions, we're actually taught that we know 99 names that God has, 99 names. And the point here is that God does not only have 99 names. We're actually taught that God has many more names, and we only know that specific number of his names. So there are names that we are not aware of. So what did the Prophet say when it comes to Islam? He said Islam is basically made up of 5 pillars, which is the focus of this topic. The first pillar, and the most important pillar, is the testimony or declaration of faith. In Arabic, we refer to it as shahada. And it basically means that you bear witness and testify that there is no God worthy to be worshipped but God. So Muslims do not associate, in other words, Muslims do not associate any partners with God. And we do not, whether those things are idols or even human beings. So Muslims would not say that Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, was the Son of God. That would actually be considered to be blasphemy in Islam. However, we do believe that Jesus Christ was someone that received an important message from God. He was an important prophet and a messenger to his people. So that is the first and most important pillar. And so you bear witness in that there is no God worthy of worship other than Allah. And you bear witness that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. And it is important to highlight here as well that in order for you to be a Muslim, you have to believe in all the traditions before us. Meaning that you cannot be a Muslim and say, you know what, I do not believe in Jesus Christ, I do not believe in Abraham. It comes as a package, and Muslims believe in it as one thing. The second point or pillar, and the reason why we refer to it as 5 pillars instead of points, it gives the idea of the structure when you want to build anything, it needs some sort of support, foundation. Without these pillars in a building, the support, that building would collapse. So the idea here is these pillars are so important to the religion that without these pillars, the whole religion would come crashing down. So the second point, or pillar rather, is establishing the 5 daily prayers in one's life. When people first hear about this, it sounds very difficult. And I often tell people that some of my friends who happen to be Christians, they tell me, how on earth do you pray 5 times a day when I struggle going to church on Sundays, right? But the idea here is that the prayer is something that is very simple. Each prayer doesn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes at most. And these prayers are scattered throughout the day from sunrise until after sunset. So it's not something that you do and get it over and done with, but the idea here is that it keeps you grounded, it focuses you on things that really have importance in your life. So if you do the quick math, let's say each prayer takes 10 minutes, and even that is a stretch. 10 times 5, that's 50. 50 minutes out of the 24 hours that you have in the day and night. So it is less than 1 hour out of those 24 hours. And again, the idea here is that the prayer is not a burden, but it is something, if it's done with the right mindset, it adds value to a person's life. Especially the lives that we live today with all the stress and all the distractions. Sometimes it's good to just have a few moments to yourself. So that is prayer, along with the third pillar, which is charity. Now, charity in Islam, it is not just something that is encouraged, but it is actually a pillar in the religion, to such an extent that if a person denies charity outright, their whole religion comes into question. And one of the beautiful things in Islam is that the idea of charity is not connected to money or necessarily wealth. Because if that was the case, then only those with money would be able to be charitable. We're taught in Islam that you can be charitable in many different ways within your own capacity. So, for example, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, meeting a complete stranger, someone that you do not know, with a smile on your face, that smile is considered to be charity. So the idea here is that charity is much more than the money that you have in your pocket or the money that you have in your bank, but things such as the knowledge that you have. You can be charitable with your knowledge. You can be charitable with your time. If someone needs you to be present, they might be going through a tough time in their life. That time that you take out of your precious life to sit down with that individual and perhaps help them, even if just by being there, that is considered to be charity in Islam. So charity is a very, very broad thing. One thing to highlight here is that the word for charity in Arabic, and Arabic is the language of the religion, the word that is used is zakat. And linguistically, it literally means something that increases. Zakat means something that increases. And the question here is, how does something that you give away increase? If you have $10 on you and you give $5, did you increase or did you decrease? In a literal sense, you decreased. You only have $5 left. However, the point here is that you increased in your humanity, you increased in your compassion. You might have even increased in ways that you do not realize or appreciate at that moment in time. So charity is a fundamental aspect It is not something that is unique to Islam, but Islam gives its understanding of what charity means. Followed by the fourth pillar, which is fasting. Again, fasting is not something that is unique to the religion of Islam. You find fasting in almost all world religions, and there's always something that is unique about fasting in those different religions. When it comes to Islam, fasting is done primarily once a year. It is encouraged to do it more than once a year. But the point here is Muslims fast in the holy month of Ramadan, which is one of the 12 Islamic months. And fasting has its spiritual, religious benefits. Muslims believe that through fasting, the connection between the individual and God is strengthened, but it also brings practical benefits. When you fast, it helps increase the person's resolve. It helps increase the person's resolve, and it also, if you remember the charity that we just mentioned, the charity is usually given in the month of Ramadan or just after the month of Ramadan. So now this charity, if you can imagine having fasted for a whole month, and now you're asked to share some of the blessings with others, chances are that you'll give a little bit more, because you'll be able to tell yourself after a month, I know the pains of hunger and thirst. I know what it means to be without. So that is one of the practical benefits of fasting. A side point here is that in Islam, we follow a different calendar. The calendar that Muslims follow, it is a lunar calendar. It is also made up of 12 months, but it is different from the Gregorian or the Western calendar that we use here. And the Gregorian Western calendar, it is a calendar that follows the sun. It's a solar calendar, whereas the Muslim calendar is a lunar calendar. Why do I mention this? Because if you take the lunar calendar and you place it on top of the solar calendar, you come up about 10 days short, So in practice, this means that the Muslim calendar year keeps moving up. It shifts about 10 days forward every year. So this means that Ramadan is never the exact same time every year. This is important to know, because if you want to be sensitive and understanding, it is good for you to know